Nights with Steve Price from the 50UP Club, Christopher Zinn.
Yes, we catch up with Christopher every Thursday night. Evening to you.
Yes, good evening, Steve.
I read with great interest the National Reform Summit and what came out of it. The Financial Review had a wraparound today. A lot of discussion about the future direction of the country. 50Up has been involved in polling 10,000 Australians. Now, I would have thought what you found out was pretty interesting. One thing I can't quite work out, 1 in 6 on your poll of over 50s don't want changes to tax on super. I would have thought it would have been higher than that.
Yeah, they made a number of selections. So 1 in 6 doesn't mean that 5 in 6 think the opposite. It just means that 1 in 6 actually prioritised that. And when we've done previous polls on that, you know, there have been more who actually want to see, surprising number who actually are prepared to see changes of tax to super. But, you know, it's certainly a key issue because that's very much been in the firing line in terms of that summit.
The other one is something that governments ought to keep in mind when they start talking about election policies. 41% of older Australians want the family home exempt from pension assets test. Again, I would have thought that might have even been higher again. I mean, no one wants an assets test on the family home. I mean, goodness me.
No, and they were asked really what was the sort of the most important things that they thought. So they had to rank those alongside energy rebates or Medicare bulk billing or no changes to super. Again, so really they put the family home as the most important. If they could only have one thing, that was the most important. And that was then followed quite a long way down by no changes to super and energy rebates for households.
And leave the pension age at 65. I thought people might have been a bit more relaxed about letting that drift out to 70. Obviously not.
Yeah, look, and again, that was something that was talked about there. In fact, it might even have to go, move up even further, and the whole way that we reinterpret what retirement is and actually what it means. So the actual age of pension is something that people are quite unsure about, but I suppose they're not quite sure, what I think it's going to be a certain age by 2025. There's there's a long, slow change. But of course, that can make a big difference to what your retirement income is going to be when your eligibility kicks in.
I think the thing about superannuation, Christopher, is I think what most people who were pushed into super in 91, 92 when it actually really kicked in, I think what most people would like to see is government saying we're not going to fiddle with it. It's a fundamental system. It's there. It's going to operate this way. We have an ambition down the track to perhaps increase the amount of your wages that go into it, but we're not going to fiddle around the edges. I mean, that's what annoys people.
Or fiddle around quite centrally, and of course that's the crisis. It is the changes which the industry super person, boss David Whiteley was saying was one of the causes of the lack of confidence in the system, really. But there again, we also had Catherine Livingstone from the Business Council saying that you had to change major policy change in super every 5 to 10 years to make sure it keeps in with its objectives. So there's sort of policy changes of a political nature, then also of an economic nature to make sure it's filling it. So none of that fills me with great confidence that they will actually lay off and leave it to experts. So there's been various proposals for sort of super custodians who are disinterested expert body to actually look at super policy development to make sure it doesn't become a political plaything. But in terms of the comments which have come back, is interesting. That point that people are terrified that one government, one hue or another, is going to raid the super piggy bank because they just can't help themselves.
Well, they see that pot of money and they just can't wait to get their hands on it. I mean, they don't change the tax scales and they allow bracket creep to eat into people's incomes, and yet they're quite willing to get in and start digging away at those trillions of dollars in super. Now, you have been running your national hashtag Fair Go for 50Ups campaign. I think you've had about 10,000 people respond so far. As you know, we're now on air right through Queensland. We started in Kingaroy. We're now on air on 4BC in Brisbane. You want Queenslanders to get involved?
Absolutely, definitely, because it'd be interesting. We can actually tally up the difference of where you come from and what you think. So it might be Queenslanders are a bit more emphatic about keeping the family home.
A few more superannuants sitting there listening to us tonight at Maroochydore on the Gold Coast and up along those beautiful retirement parts of Queensland, I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. So the point of the Fair Go 50s campaign is really to get feedback on a range of questions, particularly of relevance to over 50. So we can package that up, take it to Canberra and give them an idea of what people think who are actually directly affected by this kind of policy change. So please, Queenslanders, we want to hear from you. We have got a fair number of input from Queensland already, but I think it would be great to balance it up, and it is 50upclub.com. And just fill in that survey, let us know what you think, and we'll let the people who make the decisions let them know what you think in an aggregated sense, i.e. it's 10,000 at the moment. Love to get to 20 or 25,000.
Well, it's all about numbers, isn't it? If you turn up in Canberra with a thumping big petition and whack it on the table, they take more notice.
Exactly, and we always print them out so you can see how many pages. It's not delivered by email because they're fairly invisible, but something you can thump on the table does make a big psychological difference.
Well, it was a pleasure to catch up, Christopher. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Christopher
Bye.
Zinn there from the 50 Up Club.